Today we're testing out the new Dyna Cabs in the Axe-FX 3 Firmware 22. This is a major update to the cab sim in the Axe-FX. So up until now, the cab sim has just been a single impulse response, up to 4 IRs potentially mixed together. A lot of other companies offer a more direct simulation where you can move the microphone around on the speaker cone to find the ideal miking, which Fractal is now implementing their version of it. There's a few, we'll go through exactly how this works and how it's different than the legacy cab IRs. So you can see all of the available cabs right here. The Dyna Cabs are made with 2,048 samples. Each of those is a single IR, a single position of the microphone, and they let you select both the position of the microphone and a range of distances. Position and distance loads the appropriate IR in the background. The rumor is that competitors maybe have 1,000 samples and that it's maybe twice as many as you could possibly need. This is much more detailed control versus picking one out of a set that sounds as close as you can get. Now, my problem is still that they do not have my cab. They say they're going to be offering their robot and software. The robot meaning the device that holds the microphone and moves it the appropriate amount before each sample, because it would be very difficult to do that manually, paired with their software. They're going to rent that out. And so I'm definitely going to look into renting that out, sampling my Mesa Recto 2x12, because it's not only my favorite cab of all time, but it's my favorite Mesa Recto 2x12, and I've heard a bunch of other ones, and they're still good. I like how mine sounds the best, and so if I had that, I already wanted to get an IR of that. I have a pretty close IR from a cab pack of a similar Mesa 2x12 from the same era, because they used a particular set of vintage 30s that they don't make anymore that were 70 watts instead of 60 watts. Made in the UK instead of China. My go-to cabs are this ML USA 2x12 and some combination, usually 2 mics. I had some issues with the way that a Axe 3 combined IRs. You can have up to 4 cab IRs, but there were certain phase issues, maybe some aliasing I didn't care for. So I ended up just trying to use one that was already a combination of 2 mics that was as close as I could get to what I want. Usually the SM57 and the Ribbon, or the SM57 and the MD421. I wish there was a condenser I liked in this cab pack. Ideally, the 57 and a condenser would probably be my ideal situation, AKG 414, which is what I would like to get IRs of my cab with. And now I would as Dyna Cabs if I can get a hold of their gear. So you can see here the default cabs that come up are sampled with a 121 Ribbon, B meaning it's like the second in a set that they sampled. A, B. They're just, they're literally, you have 2 options out of these, and this is often the case. Again, unless you buy more elaborate cab packs, but they usually only have up to maybe 10. But now with the Dyna Cab, 2,048 samples per cab. Okay, I have a few tones I'm going to make today as part of this demo. The first of which is going to be for the next Flattened Earth song, not the one that's coming out July 14th, Heavy Metal is Serious Business, but the one after that. It's going to be using the JMP1 Marshall preamp, which is basically, I use the Triaxis most of the time, it's basically the Marshall Triaxis. It's their preamp, digitally controlled analog tube preamp. I've played them before in real life, and they're a nice amp. And this one was used a lot during key eras by both Judas Priest and Megadeth, and that might give you a hint as to what the next Flattened Earth song is going to be. Normally, what I would do is I would go to this bank. Here's what I've been using lately: is the SM57 and the MD421. Now, the other thing that I have to do, impulse responses, they're basically just an EQ curve. And so there's still certain elements of a real speaker cabinet that were missing, and they've already been working on simulating some of those. The main being they've added an impedance curve, and they do for that have the 2x12 Recto. And I have noticed when I slap that on, it does sound a lot closer to what I expect out of my cab. Yeah, now we're talking. I'll usually cut the lows sometimes all the way up to 200 hertz, sometimes a little less. That low end sounds good when you're just playing and chugging along, but in an actual mix, it's almost certainly going to be in the way and compete with the bass and other things. So You can see it's still got all the important mids and low mids. Probably wouldn't go lower than like 100. Somewhere between 100 and 200 on the low cut. Now this is also a slope. It's not just a straight up cut, and I can adjust that slope to be more or less aggressive. This is currently 12 decibels per octave, meaning it starts at this frequency and then rolls it off at 12 decibels per octave. So there's still some low end information. If I wanted to be really aggressive, I'd make it 24, turn it up to 100. You can really hear it's cut out there, but it still sounds really good. And in a mix, that's still going to sound great. Usually I'll leave it at 12. And since I'm not quite used to the Marshall, leave a little bit extra there. This is a painstakingly selected IR. There's lots and lots of other IRs, lots of good ones, but at the end of the day, it's just very hard for me to find one I like as much as this. And part of that is that I can't manipulate it. I can't adjust the miking. It's where it is. It's a little annoying. You have to go into the amp block, select the impedance curve of the speaker you're using. With the Dyna Cabs, you can now auto-select the impedance from Legacy to Dyna Cab. And as you can see now, we have an image of our speaker. And they really didn't waste any space with this. It only moves in this one little quadrant. We only get the face of the speaker. A lot of the times, companies will show you the full speaker and let you move it all around. I'm guessing some of that is just doubled information. Or again, sometimes it's not real samples. 4 mics, a condenser, 2 dynamics, and a ribbon. I would like to know what those mics are. I would guess that one of the dynamics is an SM57, and the other is probably a large diaphragm dynamic. If I was going to do this, I would sample the AKG C414 for the condenser, an SM57, an SM7B. I figured if I can't have my Recto 2x12, I would want the Mesa traditional 4x12. Is also not in the Dyna Cabs. So what's the closest thing? I want a 4x12 with vintage 30s that is well made. They have Rectos, but those are probably the oversized rectifier cabs, which I don't like as much. They're a little bassier, they're a little boomier in my opinion. But Friedman makes a good cab. It starts off with the mic right in the center of the cone, which we don't want. And you can hear as you move it from the cap to the edge, the difference. Now usually I end up with somewhere around here, right on where the edge of the cone, just towards not quite the edge, but towards the end of the cone. And then you can move it up to 24 centimeters away from the cab. Usually my mics are either right against the grill or within a pretty close mic'd. But you got a lot of range here, a lot you can mess around with. That sounds real good. And then the other thing I noticed here right off the bat, like I said, with the Axifex 3, whenever I would combine cabs, I'd get some kind of phasey sounds, some maybe aliasing. So I always ended up going with just one IR. So if I needed 2 mics, hopefully I had an IR that combined the mics. But the Dyna Cabs blend really well. They claim there's some new alignment stuff, but they also said they had alignment stuff before. I don't know. All I know is the thing I didn't like, I believe, is gone. So if I want to combine that dynamic and the same cab with a condenser mic, you can combine different cabs, obviously, but this is the thing I'd be more likely to do if you pay attention to certain artists' process. So like, for example, John Petrucci, I believe, uses 3 microphones on a cab when he's recording. That's more than I need, and each mic you add is adding frequency information. With phasing, there may be some that is canceled out. You are generally adding more frequencies that the one mic isn't getting. And so like the SM57 has a really good, it's the classic mic for like a metal tone, SM57 on a vintage 30, but it's a kind of narrow frequency range. It gets that gritty mid to upper mid range really, really well, but yeah, I understand you want a little bit more than that. And one way people would do that, they take another 57, put it on off axis, which is one thing they don't offer yet on the Dyna Cabs, although I'm sure there will be cab packs that'll do it that way. And a lot of the times that's how they got the classic tones out of these amps and cabs, is they had multiple mics in particular phase alignment. Let's see. Definitely don't see a comparison every day. Nice guitar. Thank you. I see one every day. I see a lot of them every day because I have several of them and I'm mildly obsessed with them. Come back and you will very frequently see a comparison on this channel because they are the guitars that you can pry from my cold dead hands, and I will great guitars. Let's add the same cab but with a condenser, and like I said, I'll put it a little closer to the cap. Let me make sure I didn't already pre-EQ these. We're gonna do the whole. We'll do the EQing in a minute. So that's just the 57, and then there's just the. See, I wouldn't necessarily use that on its own either. It's not bad. It's really good, actually. But, and then, I don't know, let's give it a little bit of distance, just see what happens if we add a couple centimeters. That sounds pretty awesome. That sounds better, way better than a lot of what I would call static IRs that I've attempted to use in the past. But someday I'm going to get the Dyna Cab of my cab, and then I will have all I ever need for simulated cabinets, and hopefully I can offer it to Patreon subscribers or something like that, or free if you give me your email or whatever marketing crap. As usual, again, I'm going to cut some lows. Let's just cut about 150 on both of them, see how that sounds. Sounds really, really good. I am very, very pleased so far with this. Now, other crazy things you can do. There's more stuff that I will probably never end up touching, but it's there. There's basic EQ. I believe this is the preamp. So this is simulating the preamp you would use to record the guitars. I really like this cab layout compared to what I have on my Helix rack. Yeah, I didn't think at first that I would like the way that it just sort of shows the speaker from like the side, or I guess arguably top down versus like face on, but since it kind of shows the distance in addition to the position, it makes a lot of sense. And again, it sounds great, and it eliminates that thing where like, oh, you can put it anywhere on the cone, but it's really not going to sound that different in the four corners in the same equivalent spot. So it really just gives you one corner to work with. You can't move it past the midpoint. Preamp. Currently it's none. Economy mode. There's economy or high quality, and you can select a bunch of different types of mic pre that you might use in a fancy studio that might make your let's use like just a tube mic, and let's set it to high quality. Wait, how do I make it go back to none? Oh, there we go. It's in the middle. It's a more subtle difference than the other things. I probably wouldn't end up using the high quality most of the time because I don't know, it sounds so great as it is, but who knows? It's an option. Here, let's leave off high quality, but go back to the tube pre. Yeah, it like warms up some of the mid frequencies a little. It's very subtle compared to everything else we've been doing. And then you can add drive and saturation, which again, if you were pushing a mic pre really hard, if you were running it really hot, you might introduce more distortion and saturation. And then there's a 3-band EQ. So that's really cool. It's really a ton of options. You can also add room sound, either a room or a hall. Another thing I usually wouldn't bother with, but it's there. If you want it to sound more like a cab mic'd in a room, you can add some of that. Let's just try it out. Yeah, it adds some extra, it sounds like it adds some extra reflections. Could just be adding like a little delay to simulate the extra reflections you would get from the room, or from this case from the hall. Let's make it a room. This could also be very useful if you just want to practice with the Axe effects with like headphones and you don't like that super dry control room sound. Like you want it to sound like you're in the room with the amp. This would be good for simulating that a little more. And then this is the alignment that shows how the cab IRs are aligned. I mean, they had something like this with the legacy IRs too. It's just that it always sounded like there was some weird phasey shit going on. And now... Now I don't hear any of that stuff. It sounds real good. Oh, you can zoom it in. Oh, geez. It's very cool. And you can still use up to 4 Dyna Cabs. That's pretty cool. Another thing you can do that I was playing around with earlier is you can pan each IR. You want to simulate a live setup where you have 2 cabs and you spread them. I mean, you could run 2 separate cab blocks to do like a stereo thing. It does sound cool. Say I just want to pan it left and right, get a very... All right, so that's pretty solid for the JMP one tone. I had a few others I want to throw together. Channel B, and now another great Axe FX 3 feature is that you got 4 channels per amp block and per cab block. So we just go to block B and we select 5153. Let's just go ahead and select it in both the first 2 slots. Dial in. Also, how are we on? It's not as loud as it needs to be. I gotta check my... But typically with the Axe effects, you get all the stuff you want lined up, you dial in the amp where you want it to be on the master volume because that will affect the tone of the amp. And then you go to the output block, and once you've got stuff, the tone kind of dialed in, you adjust the level, which is just a pure to where your actual output is... I apologize if the previous tone wasn't loud enough because I didn't check that. Amazing. Okay, now let's move a little off center and a little off. And then why not add that dynamic a little further? Where's the color? Combine them. Ooh. Could even use a little less gain, but I don't really want to. Everything sounds real good. Oh yeah, and then let me roll off those lows because you can hear them thumping. A little bit. It sounds amazing. It sounds like a 5153 with its own cab. Now let me try what the Dynamic 2 is. I'm a little curious. All right, I'd be very surprised if the Dynamic 1 isn't an SM57. Dynamic 2 could either be SM7 or an E906. And you can see that they're very common in the or MD421, E906. Could be an MD421. That's the other very popular guitar large diaphragm dynamic mic. It's a contrast to the first one for sure. You know what? Let me reposition the. This one's maybe a little. Switch this to something clean. Let's do a good old Fender Double Reverb. Let me switch to my single coils. And then Dyna Cab. Double reverb with the condenser. Maybe let's mix that, the double verb, with a ribbon. Breaking up a little, but I mean that's what a Fender will do. Still put a compressor on just for fun. All I could really ask for is just a few specific cabs that aren't in there, but really nothing right now that I couldn't find a good substitute for other than my Recto 2x12, which I'll just need to rent out their robot and software at some point. I wonder, let's put a vintage preamp. All right, just for fun, let's make a triaxis patch. See how it sounds with the Friedman cab. Sounds real good. Of course it sounds real good. Excellent. Amazing. Because for this one, I would do the... Turn off the auto impedance, select the Recto 2x12. Don't get me wrong, that's still real good. Real good. But... I think if the 2x12 would maybe edge it out if it had the right condenser there to blend in, but it's, you know, you can hear that I'm basically getting what I want both ways eventually. But it is nice that with the Dyna Cab, if it's just a tiny bit off, I can move it, and I can move it and just just listen. You know, I can move it with my ears. I can move it until it sounds right. 9 IRs for each mic combination, which was very usable. Very usable. The Dyna Cabs. Very excited to use these on future recordings. You'll probably hear them on some stuff very soon.